Good afternoon. As Anne says, my name is Mike Symes, work as a farm advisor for the Great Horseshoe Bat Project. So today I'm going to talk a little about the impact of land management advice. So this area of work forms a very large part of the project's delivery, and 10 minutes is not very long to summarise 5 years' work. But what I'll try and do is sort of highlight a few of the project's key achievements, talk a little bit about how we sort of go about working with landowners, and then pick out a nice couple of case studies to sort of demonstrate some examples of our work. So just to recap, apologies to those of you who probably may know this already, but just the areas in which we work on the project. So this map shows the 11 known maternity roosts in Devon, with a 4-kilometre radius drawn around each one. So we know obviously greater horseshoes can, of course, travel further than that, but this sort of core area that we've put around each roost, which is referring to as the roost sustenance zone, thanks to Roger Ransom, that's sort of considered the most important, particularly sort of for the young bats when they're first leaving the roost. That really core area around the roost to try and get sort of the habitats there in as good conditions as possible. So we really focused our efforts on working with landowners within these areas. So there's not going to be too much text for you to read in this talk, but I think it's probably just worth putting up a few kind of headline figures to share with you. So as you can see, lots of landowner engagement with this project. So over 450 landowners that we've engaged with. Lots of farm visits, lots of workshops. The Batworks scheme, so the fourth point I've mentioned there, is basically our own sort of small grant scheme where we give funding to projects which will enhance the landscape for great horseshoe bats. So, for example, for habitat creation works, things like that, and also community groups can have access to this funding as well. Countryside stewardship agreements. So, for those that don't know, countryside stewardship, it's a government scheme where landowners will basically receive payments for managing the land in certain ways to benefit the environment. So that could be like using less fertilizer or cutting the hedges less frequently, or those kind of things. And of course, many of those options will be benefiting great horseshoe bats and a lot of other wildlife as well. There's a few habitat figures I've just put in there. So priority habitat, that doesn't necessarily mean the really sort of species-rich habitats, but nevertheless habitats which will be available to great horseshoe bats. So that's things like cattle grazed pasture, rough field corners and areas of scrub and things like that. And a lot of emphasis on hedges as well, because the hedgerows are such important features for great horseshoe bats as they sort of move through the landscape. So we've done a lot of work on trying to put hedges into more favourable cutting or management of laying regimes and things like that. So just a few figures there for you to a few sort of headlines from the project. So obviously that sounds great, but so how do we get to that point? Of course, it's all about sort of building relationships with landowners and sort of gaining their trust, really. Yes, I mean, this can take time, but it's worth it, I think, to sort of achieve the best results. I think to get the most real engagement and to buy-in from the landowners to spend that little bit of time. And thankfully, this project, we've had 5 years. To some extent, we've been able to do that. Obviously, we'd like longer because it's never finished with this work, but we've had a good chunk of time to really get some momentum going in these areas that we're working in. And it sort of sounds a bit of a cliche in a way, but what we're trying to do is really sort of take the landowners on a bit of a journey from sort of initial contact, whether that's going to a workshop like this one here, or sort of a cold call, a brief visit to their farm. So starting with that, and then kind of go on to like a full walk over to their farm, sort of discussing management with the landowner, and so really looking for any opportunities on that farm to improve things for greater horseshoes. And then once we've sort of perhaps identified some of those potential ideas, we then look at, okay, so how do we make that happen? What some mechanisms are available to us to enable that? And so that could be, like I mentioned, using our own Batworks scheme, perhaps for small projects, helping with countryside stewardship applications for those landowners that want to sort of bring in wider farm scale management and creation works. Or it could be the landowner is able and willing to undertake a series of voluntary measures and enhancements on their land based on advice that we've given. So there's a few different things we can look at there, and I think just on the back works, I think in particular just worth mentioning. I think that's been a really great feature of this project, and in helping those landowners that perhaps don't want to get tied into a larger stewardship agreement, but just need a little bit of funding and financial help just to get their projects up and running. That's been particularly kind of successful. So I just want to go through just a couple of case studies. So this one up in the north of the county, up at Braunton. So I spent quite a bit of time in over the last few years. So the Braunton Facilitation Group, so just to explain what that is. So facilitation groups are funded through Countryside Stewardship, and they're basically designed to encourage landowners to work together collaboratively to improve their farm management across landscapes, across local landscapes. And certainly in case of the BAT project, this has been a great example of the project working with a group of landowners to achieve some real positive outcomes. So on this map here, the red circle is the 4-kilometre radius around the maternity roost in Braunton, so the sustenance zone. The red outlines are farms that we've visited and given advice to. The purple areas are areas of habitat which we've helped to improve. The green lines are hedgerows that we've helped to put into enhanced management, and the blue lines are areas of watercourse that we've influenced by having to sort of manage the riverside land in a more sort of sympathetic way. So it's a group that the projects that we sort of run this group of farmers and sort of manage the group, and the main sort of mechanism in which we sort of pass on advice is through a series of workshops. So we put on workshops on a variety of topics throughout the year. So it could be from soil management, woodlands, hedges, orchards, herbalays that Max has just been talking about, grant schemes, and of course great horseshoe bats as well. And great horseshoe bats in their own rights have been doing workshops just on on what they need, a bit about their ecology, but then also of course great horseshoes will benefit from a lot of these the management of a lot of these features and habitats that I've just mentioned. So some of these other workshops that we've run, even if perhaps landowners might not come along expecting to hear a lot about bats when they're talking about orchards or talking about herbalays, whatever, we often end up talking about great horseshoes in a lot of these workshops, just because they are so potentially affected by the management that's going on farm. So we have 32 members in the group, and 3/4 of those now are in stewardship schemes of some kind, which is fantastic, which is great, because that's going to be including a load of bat-friendly management options within those agreements. And because by being a member of the group, of this facilitation group, the landowners get a points boost to their score in their Countryside Stewardship application, because it's a competitive scheme. So, but they only get that little kind of boost if their applications are endorsed by the project, so that's great. That means I get to see all the applications that go in. We can have discussions with the landowner. We can I can suggest amendments or alterations to try and bring in other areas of habitat or other key flight lines perhaps you might want to look in, or a particular hedge that perhaps the landowner might not have considered. So we get some really good sort of input into those schemes, which is really important, I think. 4 members of the group have received BATworks grants. That's been for orchard creation, new hedge creation, and fencing to reinstate cattle grazing on an area close to the roost. And we sort of try and do it strategically as well. So, for example, the 2 hedges I've just been talking about have been put in sort of linking to an existing great horseshoe hibernation roost. So hopefully that's giving the bats some other opportunities and ways to leave the roost and explore other areas of the landscape around them. So through the facilitation group, the landowners are really getting increasing their knowledge about bats and obviously wider habitat management. And the messages about what bats need are really getting through to them, which is great. So it's really pleasing. So we just move Now to the south of the county, just another little case study just I wanted to talk about. So this is a farm near Dartmouth, and yeah, this is a really nice example, I think, of so where a landowner has been engaged with the project. They've been keen to do good things, and we've had really, as a result of the contact here, we've had really positive results for great horseshoe bats and other wildlife on this site. So the landowner attended a workshop sort of in the early stages of the project, then had a farm visit from one of the project advisors, and then received a Batworks grant for wildflower seed, because they wanted to turn this arable field here, which you can see, into a wildflower meadow. So that was it beforehand, and then that's what it looks like now, which is full of wildflowers, full of insects, great for bats to be feeding on the insects in this area. So this view is, I hope you can see, is almost the same as the last one. So if I just flip back, you can look at the tree on the horizon there, just as a point of reference. So it's almost taken from the same point. So that's a really nice kind of little before and after. This is another view of the same meadow from sort of the bottom, looking back up towards where the other photographs were taken from, looking down. So yeah, it's full of vetches, knapweed, trefoils, loads of great wildflowers in there. I say absolutely alive with insects. When I was there early in the year, it's just absolutely humming. Fantastic. And I think this site, we're now hoping that this site will be designated as a county wildlife site, which would be great, just in recognition of that high wildlife value. Because we did some good surveys, some survey work this summer, and I say there's lots of good things in there. So we're going to be putting that one forward for designation early next year. So that's great. So that's just a really nice little example, I think, of a keen landowner with a little bit of advice and support from the BAT project, and then that's resulted in creation of a fantastic wildflower-rich, insect-rich habitats, and hopefully a designation to recognise that as well. So that's it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but if you sort of summarise it into two key points, I guess, is what are the impacts of land management advice. Obviously, there's many other examples I could have used and could have brought in there, but the two key things are, hopefully it's resulted in better quality habitats and more connected landscapes as a result of our advice and working with landowners to implement some of those land management practices that we'd like to see, which will help the bats, and also that increased knowledge and awareness and hopefully enthusiasm amongst the landowning community of great horseshoes and what they need. And of course, so the aim is really that many of these farmers will then in future be managing the land with bats in mind. And also there's another little point of sort of project legacy. So moving forward into next year, we've also delivered, myself and Hannah have delivered training sessions to other groups of land advisors, so Natural England, Devon Wildlife Trust, Fike South West, West Country Rivers Trust, to so that when they're out on farm, they can be discussing the needs of great horseshoe bats as part of their farm visits. So that's hopefully will make sure that if we're not there, at least the messages are still getting out there, and particularly for those key sites in really close proximity to the bat roosts. And there's just a nice quote from one of our landowners in South Devon. But as I say, been lots of landowners engaged, and hopefully we spread that message quite far and wide. So I'd just like to just finish by thanking our project partners and funders. We've helped to make the work possible, and thank you very much for listening.